George was always a friendly, outgoing kid. When we moved to a new town for my husband's job, I wasn't worried about him making friends. But George had a habit of attracting the unusual ones. One day, I got a call from his school. There had been an incident between George and another boy, Sebastian. Apparently, George had hit Sebastian with an eraser, causing him to fall and scream. I was shocked. George wasn't violent. At the principal's office, I learned no one had seen what happened. Both boys told the same story, and George wasn't in trouble. But something felt off. That night, George finally opened up. "George, Mom, Sebastian tricked me. We were playing Street Fighter, and he told me to use the eraser as a KO move. But then he fell and whispered, 'If you don't say you hit me, I'll hurt you.' So I did. I was furious. My son had been manipulated. I called Sebastian's mom, Maggie, who apologized and suggested a sleepover to help the boys bond. Reluctantly, I agreed. The night started fine. The boys played games, and Maggie seemed kind and genuine. But when I picked George up the next morning, he was quiet. On the drive home, he broke down. "George, Mom, something's wrong with Sebastian. Last night, I woke up and heard him talking in the bathroom. He was calling himself Mr. Jim and having a full conversation with the mirror. Then he came out and whispered something over me. It wasn't English. I was too scared to move. I called Maggie, who admitted Sebastian had been diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder. They'd moved twice because of his behavior. I was horrified. Whatever was inside Sebastian, it wasn't just a child. When my daughter Emily turned 6, she started talking about an imaginary friend named Clara. At first, I thought it was cute, but then things got weird. Emily would leave food out for Clara, and it would disappear. She'd have full conversations in her room, but when I walked in, she'd be alone. One day, she asked me, "Mommy, can Clara sleep in my bed tonight?" I laughed it off, but that night, I heard whispers coming from Emily's room. I opened the door, and Emily was sitting on the floor, staring at an old doll I'd never seen before. "Emily, Mommy, this is Clara. She's been living in the attic." I took the doll and put it back in the attic, but the next morning, it was back in Emily's room. This happened every night for a week. I decided to investigate the attic. What I found shocked me. The doll wasn't just a toy. It was an antique, with a cracked face and faded clothes. But the real horror was the box it came in. Inside were old photos of a little girl who looked just like Emily, and a newspaper clipping about her mysterious disappearance 50 years ago. I threw the doll away, but Emily cried for days, saying Clara was lonely. Eventually, she stopped talking about her, but sometimes, late at night, I hear whispers coming from the attic. When my son Liam was born, we moved into a charming old house, but from the first night, something felt wrong. Liam would cry uncontrollably in his nursery, even when he wasn't hungry or tired. I'd rock him to sleep, but as soon as I put him down, he'd wake up screaming. One night, I saw it, a shadowy figure standing over his crib. I told my husband, but he thought I was imagining things. Then, one night, we both saw it. The figure was tall and thin, with glowing red eyes. We moved Liam to our room, but the shadow followed. We called a priest, who told us the house had a dark history. Decades ago, a man had murdered his family in the nursery. The shadow was his spirit, drawn to Liam's innocence. We moved out immediately, but the shadow stayed with us. Even in our new home, Liam would wake up crying. and I'd see the figure standing in the corner of his room. Parenting is hard enough without the added horror of the unknown. These stories remind us that sometimes the scariest things aren't outside our doors, they're already inside.